She used to fix old elevators with her cleaning mom. No one knew this girl was a genius. But one day, a billionaire got stuck in the elevator, and she was the only one who knew what to do. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. What city are you from? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. The morning began like it always did, with silence and steam. At exactly 5:42 a.m., the maintenance entrance of the Altex Tower exhaled a sigh of pressure as the sliding door stuttered open. The air outside was already thick with heat, though the sun hadn't yet risen above the skyline. Inside, the marble floors gleamed with cold indifference, untouched by the day's coming chaos. And through that quiet space walked a girl no one ever noticed. Her name was Yasmin, though no one ever said it aloud inside this building. She followed behind her mother, as she always did, just a few paces back, enough to keep from being seen as a pair. Not because they weren't close. Her mother was the only person Yasmin trusted, but because they had learned the rules of this place. In Altex Tower, invisibility was a form of protection. Cleaners weren't supposed to be noticed, and neither were their children, especially children. Her mother pushed a heavy cart of supplies across the pristine floor, the wheels groaning slightly despite the recent oiling. She wore her uniform like armor, blue coveralls with a name tag that read A. Bakari in small white lettering. She moved like she belonged to the space yet didn't dare touch it. Head down, shoulders forward, quiet steps. Yasmin mirrored her exactly, only smaller, more careful. She carried a drawstring bag that sagged from age and too much weight. Inside were three things: a frayed notebook with no lines, a dismantled walkie-talkie wrapped in a sock, and a circuit board she had been trying to rebuild for weeks. They didn't speak as they entered. They rarely did. Not here. The security guard at the back entrance barely glanced up. His screen showed the usual staff log. He pressed a button lazily, unlocking the elevator to the utility floor. 18, her mother said softly. The same floor as always. Yasmin nodded and peeled off, heading not to the elevators, but to the stairwell. She preferred the quiet of steps, the echo of her own feet. There was something comforting about their rhythm, something she could measure and map in her mind. Her mother disappeared behind the freight doors, swallowed by the silence she cleaned for other people to live in. Yasmin walked up 2 flights and slid into the small storage closet next to the server cooling room. It wasn't locked. No one thought to lock it, and inside was her refuge. It smelled like damp wires and floor polish, but to her it was a laboratory, a haven. In the corner, behind boxes of unused paper towels, sat her treasure, a discarded access panel from an old service elevator. She'd found it weeks ago, sticking out of a trash bin behind the building. A janitor had told her to leave it, that it was just broken junk. She had nodded, then waited, then taken it anyway. Now it sat on an overturned crate, wires spilling out like veins, some cut, others taped back together with stubborn precision. Yasmin knelt in front of it and reached into her bag, pulling out her notebook. She flipped past pages filled with looping lines and colored blocks, past mathematical guesses and scribbled out formulas, until she reached a fresh page. Her fingers traced the edge of the board in front of her. She didn't know why it mattered so much to fix it. Maybe because it once moved people, up, down, across worlds they didn't even see. It was built to lift, to connect. Now it sat silent, forgotten, declared useless. But to her it still had a heartbeat. She touched the copper connector gently and closed her eyes. Some kids dreamed in pictures. Yasmin dreamed in diagrams. She began sketching without hesitation, not copying, not imagining, translating, Her pencil danced across the paper in arcs and angles, overlaying function on form. There was a beauty in the way voltage traveled, like a secret language of pulses and pauses. She had learned to read it before she ever truly read books. No one had taught her. No teacher, no school. Just broken radios, overheard instructions, late-night YouTube clips that buffered endlessly on borrowed Wi-Fi, and her own curiosity, hungry and endless and quiet like the sky before rain. Sometimes she thought about how strange it was that no one really saw her. She had spent her whole life surrounded by machines, buildings, elevators, buzzers, switches, but never people who looked her in the eye when she spoke. Not that she spoke much. Silence became easier than explaining what she saw when she touched a motherboard. Safer, too. A week ago, a man in the elevator had asked her if she was the trash girl. She had looked at him, then at her notebook, and said nothing. He hadn't meant it cruelly, just carelessly, like someone stepping over a pebble they didn't realize was a diamond. She kept sketching. Outside, the building stirred to life. Executives arrived in sleek cars, digital badges buzzed on access panels, heels clicked against floors polished hours earlier by her mother. The world of Altex spun on, never noticing the girl sitting inside its walls, drawing blueprints for a machine no one else believed could work again. Yasmin didn't care. Not really. She wasn't fixing the machine for them, she was fixing it for herself. She looked up at the overhead vent. The fan inside it was off balance. It made a faint rhythmic tapping that no one else noticed, but to her it was a countdown, a signal. She knew the elevator system here better than anyone should. She had mapped the power grid from memory. Not all of it, of course, but enough to recognize the sound of a loop backfiring, the static buzz of a relay stuck open, the hum of energy moving in the wrong direction. And, as her pencil scratched faster, translating sound into form, she felt that flicker again, that sense of presence, as if the panel in front of her wasn't just wires and screws, but something more, something that could still be brought back to life. It was 7:21 a.m. when her mother texted her, a single emoji. That meant the second shift had started. Yasmin stood, carefully slid the notebook back into her bag, and took one last look at the broken panel. It would work. She didn't know when, but it would, and when it did, she wouldn't tell anyone, because this wasn't for them. This was proof that even broken things, when understood, could still move. She stepped out of the closet and melted back into the stairwell, invisible once more. But not for long. It started with a spark, inaudible, unseen, but very real. At precisely 8:17 a.m., the east side lift bank on the 38th floor of Altex Tower stalled. Not all at once, not with drama or flashing lights, but with a subtle hiccup. The kind of glitch that doesn't make headlines. The kind engineers chalk up to early firmware stress and move on. But this time, it didn't move on. The lift froze mid-floor. Inside, the silence was suffocating. David Caron, CEO of Orion Systems and the kind of man whose name appeared in finance headlines as if it were a stock ticker, stood in the center of the chrome-walled cabin. His phone had just vibrated with the 10th urgent message of the morning. Timelines, contracts, forecasts, all leading to one monumental meeting, one floor away, and then nothing. The lights didn't go out, the panel didn't buzz. The elevator simply stopped. No jolt, no lurch, just a soft, quiet betrayal. He looked at his assistant, who blinked back at him, pale and unsure. The cup of coffee in her hand trembled slightly. The timer on David's watch kept ticking. He tapped the call button once, twice. No response. "Emergency override," he said. She pressed it. Nothing. Karen's expression didn't change, but something in his jaw tightened. He opened his phone, tapped into the building app, tried the executive override. Access denied. He checked the Wi-Fi. No signal. He checked the cell bars. 0. "Do you have internal?" he asked his assistant. "No, sir. It's frozen." "Frozen?" She nodded. He didn't sigh. David Karen didn't sigh. But he did stare at the elevator panel for a long time as if daring it to unfreeze. It didn't. On the 30th floor, the head of facilities was already sweating bullets. "It's locked between 37 and 38, said one tech. "System's not responding to reboot." Another engineer leaned closer to a screen. "Manual overrides offline. Looks like we're locked out of the diagnostics layer." "How?" "No idea. This isn't a software error. It's like the system doesn't even know it's broken." That was when the panic started. Quiet panic, corporate panic, hidden under jargon and professional head nods. But it was real. The tower was running on a complex grid of micro-updates, adaptive nodes, and predictive switches. Orion Systems had designed it that way. Built for efficiency, built for elegance, built to run without thinking. Now it had stopped thinking entirely. The engineers tried protocol after protocol. Nothing worked. And while a dozen floors above them, executives scrambled to explain to clients why the CEO was momentarily delayed, no one noticed the quiet girl in the basement, seated in a maintenance alcove, staring at a status light that just flickered wrong. Yasmin blinked. That wasn't the normal blink. It wasn't the usual test cycle pulse or fail-safe check. It was hesitation, and machines didn't hesitate. She stood, stepped closer to the aging panel she'd spent the last month rebuilding. The flicker repeated. Not chaotic, rhythmic, off-pattern. Her eyes narrowed. She closed her notebook and stuffed it into her bag, walked quietly down the hall, past a stack of unused crates, past a humming janitor cart, to the one wall no one else paid attention to, the lower-level elevator override console. It was ancient, mostly disconnected, mostly. She flipped open the rusted panel door and stared at the circuit inside. Her fingers brushed the housing. She heard it again, a click in the wiring above. Then another. Delay. Reset. Fail. Something was wrong. Not just wrong, misaligned. She unplugged the safety loop and inserted her audio probe, a modified headphone jack with alligator clips she'd soldered herself, held it to her ear. The elevator was talking, but the voice was cracked. She heard the relay stutter. Loop command issued. Not received. Issued again. No return. It was caught, like a person stuck in a story loop, asking the same question over and over, not realizing it had already been answered. It reminded her of something she'd seen before. Not in a building. In a handheld music player her cousin had once fried with bad batteries. The processor had survived, but the signal paths kept trying to route through a corrupted buffer. The same stutter. The same logic trap. She took out her notebook, sketched the elevator's logic sequence from memory, then stared at it, and saw the flaw. Not in the machine. In the way the machine was trying to fix itself. It wasn't failing. It was fighting. Trying to correct a command it didn't understand. And every time it failed, it locked tighter. Yasmin looked down the hallway. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to touch anything. But the loop was escalating. If it spread to the building's smart routing system, it could lock other elevators. Then other grids. Altec's tower wasn't just glass and steel. It was digital muscle and bone. And it had a broken nerve. She didn't hesitate. She pulled the maintenance screwdriver from her bag, cracked the override console, and began working. Above her, David Karen pressed his hands to the lift wall, then stepped back. "What's the update?" he barked into the emergency panel, which was now crackling. "Still locked, sir. Working on it." "Define working." "We're attempting a subroutine reset." "Attempting?" More silence. He turned to his assistant. "Call external ops. Tell them to prep remote access." "Sir," she hesitated. "Remote won't connect. The net link is down. Full isolation." David Karen had seen many disasters in his career. Mergers gone wrong. Stocks in free fall. But this? Being held hostage by a building that was supposed to anticipate his every need? It was unthinkable, unacceptable, and, most dangerously, unfixable. Until the lights flickered. Just once. Barely a breath. Then the cabin shook softly. The panel blinked blue. The gears above them groaned. Then, slowly, the lift began to descend. Floor after floor, silence returning with every passing number. And when it reached the lobby, the doors hissed open. He expected engineers, guards, a swarm of apologies. Instead, there was a girl, alone, seated by an open wall panel, holding a pair of pliers like a pen. Beside her, a tangle of wires and one glowing capacitor still humming with life. She looked up at him, didn't flinch, didn't smile, just said quietly, "I didn't want you to get stuck." Karen stared. For a second, just a second, his brain tried to process what he was seeing. A child, a wire, a reconnected loop, no badge, no uniform, no clearance. He opened his mouth, said nothing, then walked out of the elevator, past her, into the morning. He didn't turn back. Yasmin watched him go, didn't move, didn't smile, just picked up her notebook and wrote down the sequence. Loop, delay, pulse, manual reset, repaired, then closed the book and disappeared back into the stairwell, as if she had never been there at all. The rest of the day unfolded like a dropped stack of glass panes, silent for a moment, then shattering in every direction. Inside the Altex control hub, engineers stared at monitors they no longer trusted. Logs failed to sync. Diagnostic timestamps made no sense. One technician claimed the error was due to a firmware ghost, whatever that meant. Another muttered something about memory leaks and dirty registers. No one had answers, only contradictions. But somewhere in the haze of contradictions was a single fact: the elevator system had failed. It had frozen, resisted every override, and then, without warning, it had corrected itself. No official patch, no confirmed protocol, just a soft flicker and resolution. And someone had seen it. On the internal security feed, a man with a buzzed haircut and clipped voice rewound the footage. He scrubbed through timestamps until he found it. Timestamp 8 hours, 59 minutes, and 42 seconds. Lobby cam, service corner. He paused on the frame. A child, kneeling, focused, alone, wires spilling out of a torn panel, a handmade device in one hand, a small book resting beside her knee. He stared at the screen for a long time, then flagged the video and sent it up the chain. 2 hours later, it reached David Karen. He sat alone in his executive suite, a space built to intimidate. Black glass, brushed metal, and sill, vents. A tablet rested in front of him, glowing with the paused image. He tapped play. The girl moved with intention, sliding wires into place, running connections, pausing to listen, adjusting not with fear but with precision. Her hands never hesitated. She never looked over her shoulder. Her face was calm. It was like watching someone perform surgery or art. She didn't just act like she belonged there. She acted like the system belonged to her. Karen leaned back, For years, he had overseen the construction of smart towers, intelligent elevators, learning HVAC systems. He had invested in voice-controlled homes, adaptive traffic signals, sensor-based wearables. And yet, this girl had bypassed it all with pliers and instinct. "Who is she?" he asked aloud. His assistant shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. "We're not entirely sure, sir." "You have facial recognition. Entry logs, use them." "We ran a check. She comes in with the cleaning crew. One of the overnight shifts. No ID on record. Probably not on payroll. Daughter of Aminata Bakari, janitorial." Karen looked back at the screen. "A janitor's daughter," he said flatly. His assistant stayed quiet. Karen stared at the footage again, then tapped the screen, zoomed in, watched her hands, her eyes, her stillness. He remembered a time when he had been still like that, before the suits, before the boardrooms. Once. "Find her," he said. "Sir?" "Find her," he repeated. "Bring her in." "No security?" "No," Karen said quietly. "No one raises a voice. No one touches her. Just bring her, politely." The assistant left in a hurry. Down in the service floor, Yasmin was already packing her things. Her mother had told her to stay out of sight. Something about a mistake, about too much attention. Yasmin didn't argue. She rarely did. She didn't fear getting in trouble. She feared being seen wrong, misunderstood. She wasn't trying to rebel. She hadn't touched the panel out of pride. She had heard a system cry out and simply answered. But now the walls were shifting. The air was strange. The quiet was broken. "Yasmin Bakari?" She turned. A young man in a collared shirt and company lanyard stood in the hallway. He looked nervous. "We'd like you to come upstairs." Her mother appeared behind her in an instant, wiping her hands on a cloth. "What for?" "No trouble. The executive team just wants to talk to her." "Why?" I don't know. They said to bring her, just her." Her mother looked down at Yasmin, and for a moment the hallway felt very small. "Stay close," she whispered. Yasmin nodded. She followed the man up the elevator, the very same one she had repaired just hours earlier. The ride was smooth now, silent, clean. At the top, the doors opened to a floor with carpet so thick it swallowed sound. Light poured in through endless windows. Everything smelled like money and lemon polish. They led her into a boardroom. Not a room, really. A cathedral. At one end, David Karen sat alone at the table, a tablet in front of him. His hands were steepled, his tie was loosened, his face unreadable. Yasmin stopped at the doorway. "You can come in," he said. She stepped inside slowly, notebook clutched to her chest like armor. He gestured to the chair opposite him. She sat. They didn't speak for several seconds. Then he slid the tablet across the table. The screen showed her image, kneeling beside the panel. "You fixed it," he said. "I didn't want you to get stuck. You weren't supposed to be there. I know. No training, no manual, no clearance. I know." He leaned back. "How?" She hesitated, then opened her notebook, flipped to a page, slid it across the table. He looked down. It wasn't code, not exactly. It was a drawing. Lines, loops, flow paths, a visual interpretation of logic, like circuit maps reimagined as river currents. Power sequences rendered in arcs. Decisions blooming like branches. It didn't follow engineering convention, but it made sense. Beautiful, instinctive sense. "This is how you think?" he asked. She nodded. He stared at the page for a long time, then passed it back. "I didn't call you here to punish you." She said nothing. "I called you here because no one in my building could do what you did, not even close." She lowered her eyes. "I'm offering you access to the labs, to the tools. You'll be a guest, a student, whatever you want to call it." Her eyes lifted slowly. "Can I still break things?" He blinked. "What?" She repeated softly. "If I don't understand something, can I take it apart?" He stared at her, then, for the first time in days, smiled. "That's the only way to learn." She reached out, took back the drawing, and tucked it into her book. Karen watched her, saw the way she moved, carefully, with quiet precision. The girl who had appeared from nowhere, who had solved a system failure with her hands and her instincts, who had asked for nothing except the freedom to keep breaking things until she understood how to fix them. He stood. "We'll have someone escort you down. You can come back tomorrow. Or next week. Your choice." She nodded once, then left. Outside, the hallway was quiet again. The world hadn't changed. But she had been seen. Really seen. And the walls would never forget it. The next morning, Yasmin woke before the sky turned blue. She didn't need an alarm. Her thoughts stirred her into wakefulness before dawn, her body rising as though pulled by gravity stronger than sleep. She didn't rush. She never did. She moved quietly through the small apartment, stepping over the creaking board near the bathroom, careful not to wake her mother. By 6 a.m., her backpack was ready, her notebook safely zipped inside, 2 sharpened pencils tucked between the pages, a wrapped sandwich she might or might not eat, and a tiny toolkit she'd pieced together from discarded parts. 1 flat screwdriver, 1 pair of tweezers, a spool of wire stripped down to threads, and the soldering pen she'd inherited from a neighbor who moved out in the middle of the night last spring. She didn't tell her mother right away where she was going, not because she was hiding it, but because she didn't know how. How do you explain to someone who spent her whole life scrubbing silence into floors that you've been asked to walk into a place where people hold meetings in rooms made of glass? But her mother already knew. She always did. When Yasmin pulled on her hoodie and reached for the door, a voice followed. "You eat something first," her mother said softly, not turning from the small kitchen stove. Yasmin hesitated, then stepped back and sat. They shared tea and rice in silence. At 7:30, Yasmin left. This time, she entered Altec's tower not through the freight corridor or the back stairwell, but through the front. The revolving doors whispered as she passed. People noticed her. Not in the usual way, not with judgment or dismissal, but with curiosity. A few even nodded. One woman in a pantsuit smiled briefly before continuing her conversation. Yasmin kept walking. A young man, Elias, she remembered from the boardroom, met her at the elevator. He didn't ask if she was ready. He didn't ask if she was nervous. He simply said, "They're upstairs," and pressed the button. The lift was silent again, but she could feel the difference. This wasn't a space she was trespassing in. It was a space waiting for her. The conference room was quieter than the day before. Smaller, more human. Fewer people. A long table, 1 chair at the end, a stack of documents on one side, a single blue folder in the center. David Karen wasn't seated yet, but others were. A woman with square glasses and short silver hair, a man in a sweater that looked too expensive to be comfortable. Elias sat at the far end, notebook open, pen already in hand. Yasmin took her place at the table without being asked. The room didn't feel cold, but it didn't feel safe either. The woman with glasses spoke first. "How did you know what to do?" Yasmin blinked. "Which part?" A few people chuckled lightly, not mocking, surprised. "The override," another said, "the repair, the mapping, all of it." Yasmin didn't answer immediately. She opened her notebook and flipped through several pages, each marked with tiny colored tabs. But she didn't stop on any of them. Instead, she flipped to a blank page. "I don't know how to say it," she admitted. "Not in words." She began to draw. Lines first, then curves, then loops. She used 2 pencils at once sometimes, switching shades to represent polarity, resistance, interruption. She shaded lightly where energy would fade, marked points with dots where pressure built. The image unfolded like a story told without voice. The woman with the glasses leaned forward. The man in the sweater stopped typing. Elias watched without blinking. Yasmin rotated the page and slid it forward. No one reached for it right away. Then Karen walked in. He didn't greet them. Didn't sit. He stood behind the chair and looked down at the paper. He didn't ask what it was. He understood. "This loop," he said, pointing at the lower quadrant. "What do you call it?" Yasmin hesitated. "It doesn't really have a name." "Why did you draw it that way?" "It's how I stop the system from folding in on itself. When a command repeats too fast, it tries to fix something that isn't broken. This slows it down so it can listen." Karen nodded slowly. He turned the page again, looked at it sideways. "You see code like a landscape," he said. Yasmin didn't respond. It wasn't a question. He sat down. "You know," he said, "I built this building to be smarter than the people inside it. But when it failed, none of them could fix it." Yasmin looked at him. "You made it too polite," she said. "It didn't know how to scream." Karen's jaw flexed, then softened. "I want to offer you access, real access, a place here. Tools, mentors, whatever you need." She didn't answer. Her fingers tapped the edge of her book. "Not as a token, not as a mascot, as a mind we need." She looked down. "I don't like rules," she said. Karen tilted his head. "Which ones?" "The kind that say I can't open something just because it's expensive." He smiled faintly. "Then don't." She looked up again, her eyes clear, steady. "You'll be allowed to break things," he said. "In fact, I expect it." The room exhaled. The woman with glasses whispered something to her neighbor. Elias sat back, as if confirming something he had suspected all along. Karen stood. "I want to show you something." He led her out of the room, down a hallway lined with photos, architects, engineers, software developers, awards, framed articles, vision statements, and backlit panels. He stopped at a door with a black handle and swiped his ID. Inside, the room was nothing like the rest of the building. It was messy. Tables littered with devices, half-built, half-broken, screens turned sideways, shelves stacked with discarded motherboards and processor kits. "This is where we build the things we're not ready to show anyone." He turned to her. "It's yours now." Yasmin stepped forward, touched the nearest table. There were solder scars on the wood, dust in the corners, a faint smell of burnt copper. It felt like home. "You don't have to decide now," Karen said. "I already did." He didn't argue, didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he reached for something behind a monitor and handed it to her. A badge, white plastic, red trim. It said, "All text systems, level R. Yasmin Bakari, guest, special access. No last name, no title, just presence." She took it, didn't smile, but something shifted in her posture, something calm, confident. Karen walked to the door, then turned back. "One more thing," he said. She waited. "I'm not the one doing you a favor," he said. "I know," she replied, and she meant it. The next morning, Yasmin woke to the sound of the city stretching its bones. Garbage trucks groaned on the street below, pipes ticked in the wall, the neighbor's shower hissed against thin tile. It was a weekday like any other, but something was different. Her badge sat quietly on the nightstand next to her bedroll, catching a sliver of morning light. She had traced her fingers across the letters sometime in the night, just to be sure it hadn't been a dream. She didn't put it on right away. She dressed as she always did. Same hoodie, same worn jeans, same canvas shoes with the heel that flapped if she didn't land her steps right. She tied the badge inside the inner strap of her backpack. Not hidden, but not on display. She didn't need the world to see it yet. Her mother was already in the kitchen, pouring water over the stovetop kettle. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed a small wrapped sandwich on the table, next to a folded napkin and the tiniest, proudest nod Yasmin had ever seen. It was enough. By the time Yasmin entered Altec's tower, the building already knew her. Not just the sensors, or the badge readers, or the elevators that opened with one soft chime. The people. She stepped into the lobby and the receptionist stood a little straighter. Someone from facilities gave a thumbs up. A group of engineers leaned in slightly when she passed, like she might drop a breadcrumb of brilliance. But she didn't perform. She just walked. The elevator doors opened, a floor higher than she'd ever been before. Her lab was at the end of a hallway that curved like a question mark. The sign on the door read, R Lab 7, Independent Systems Research. But someone had scrawled over it in permanent marker, Yasmin's brain. No one admitted who. She didn't erase it. She stepped inside, and for the first time a room waited for her. Tables, screens, tools, machines in various states of collapse and resurrection. Stacks of circuit boards, half labeled, half mysterious. The air smelled of ozone and dust and new beginnings. There was no one telling her what to build. There was no manual, no deadline, just possibility. She unpacked her notebook, laid out her pencils, pulled the old audio probe from her bag and set it beside a box labeled Unstable Signal Units. She opened a diagnostic screen, tapped in a few queries, and began to listen. That was her genius. She didn't see systems as problems. She saw them as conversations. Around her, engineers moved like shadows, glancing in, hovering near her station, waiting for cues that never came. A few brought snacks. One left a small pack of pastel markers on the edge of her table with a note, "For when black and white doesn't cut it." She didn't say thank you, but she started using the blue one right away. Weeks passed, not in fanfare but in rhythm. Yasmin became a fixture at Altex, not a mascot, not a rumor, not a one-time miracle. A presence. She didn't attend meetings. People came to her. She didn't ask for permission. She prototyped. She didn't care for titles or schedules. But when she noticed a voltage drop in the lab's secondary power supply, she rewired it without fanfare before anyone else caught it. Elias checked in often, quietly, sometimes with a question, sometimes with a device he didn't know how to fix, sometimes with silence. They rarely spoke much, but he always brought her broken things. David Karen changed too, though he hated to admit it. He still wore tailored suits, still moved with the air of someone 10 steps ahead, but his steps had slowed, not from doubt, from awareness. He spent more time in the lab, not giving orders, just watching, listening, learning. On the edge of his desk in the executive suite, nestled between his tablet and an untouched Crystal Award for Global Innovation Leadership, sat a framed piece of paper, Yasmin's first drawing. He hadn't scanned it, hadn't polished it. It still had a grease smudge in the corner. One afternoon, a board member paused at the frame and raised an eyebrow. "New acquisition," he joked. Karen didn't smile. "That's the future," he said. Yasmin still rode the bus with her mother, still scavenged on the walk home. Old toys, cracked radios, a broken calculator someone tossed near a dumpster. She never passed broken things without checking for salvage. She didn't see trash. She saw puzzle pieces. Her room remained a jungle of wires and repurposed parts. The only change was that now her mother didn't sigh when she saw the mess. She made space on the table instead. At work, Yasmin's influence began to ripple. When she noticed an error in a third-party firmware update, she didn't say a word. She just rewrote the logic chain and left a sticky note. This loop bleeds voltage. Try decoupling. No signature, no flourish, but it worked. When a vendor insisted their diagnostic tool was flawless, she sent back a screenshot with the time-stamped line that proved otherwise. One of the department heads framed the printout. She was asked to attend a conference. She declined. Journalists came sniffing around. One cornered her near the service elevator. "Do you know they're calling you the elevator girl?" Yasmin stared. "Do you have a quote for us?" She paused, then said, "I like the problem." That was all. The reporter printed it anyway. Front page. One night, long after the others had gone, Karen returned to his office and found something new on his desk. Not a report, not a schematic, a note, folded in two, torn from a notebook. On it, in small, careful writing, "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me." Karen didn't speak, didn't sit. He stared at the note for a long time, then walked to the window and looked out over the city. Its blinking lights, its tangled systems, its noise and silence and chaos. He had built towers, empires, networks, but he had nearly missed the most extraordinary signal of all. Yasmin didn't wait for applause. She kept building, kept breaking, kept listening. Because some systems don't change with noise. They change when someone finally hears the quiet voice inside and answers. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. We create every piece with care and purpose, and your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Share this video with someone who still believes in quiet brilliance. And if you're ready for another unforgettable journey, watch the next story. It's waiting for you.